everyone, welcome back to my channel. So today I have a book review or a book recommendation. You guys have been probably watching my other book recommendations that I didn't recommend because I didn't really care for them very much, but this one is definitely what I would say is a must-have. And I have very, very few books that I would say are a must-have for those of us with chronic illness. This is one. It is called The Long COVID Survival Guide by Fiona Lowenstein. Now, I believe this book was written in response to an article, and that article, I will review or talk about that article in a separate video, but it was an article in the New Republic. That's, I guess, some kind of publication. I don't know if it's an American publication or a publication somewhere else, but it basically was an article that was just talking about how long COVID could be a functional disorder, or basically all in your head, to put it, to summarize it. And she mentioned, the author of that article mentioned Fiona Lowenstein and another doctor who is at the forefront of long COVID. Her name is Akiko. I always forget her name. I know her first name is Akiko, and she is I believe she's a Yale researcher or professor, and she's at the forefront of long COVID. She also is in this book as well, but the book is written by Fiona Lowenstein with excerpts from people that have long COVID. So I want to start with my two complaints of this book. Number one is what it looks like. So this is what the book looks like. It is a bright yellow book called The Long COVID Survival Guide. The reason I don't like that cover is because it's very bright, very cheerful, and this book is, I don't want to say that it's depressing. Yes, it is depressing, but I feel like it's a little bit misleading because the book is actually, like the ultimate chronic illness survival guide. I feel like it should have had like maybe a blue cover or a black cover or something, but it's so cheery, and actually it almost looks like a children's book. So I think that kind of throws me off a little bit. The other issue that I have is the title. This should be called The Ultimate Chronic Illness Survival Guide. I really wish that it had, much broader name, because I recommend this book to anybody with a chronic illness, not just those people that are dealing with long COVID. Anybody, especially if you are new to chronic illness, get this book. And that's another thing I'm going to recommend. I listened to the audiobook because that one was immediately available. And so I listened to the audiobook. It's actually not a super long book, which is great too for those of us who have kind of shorter attention spans or struggle to get through a book. But I highly recommend getting a hard copy of this book because you're going to want to put sticky notes or bookmark certain areas, and you'll find out why. But I definitely think that this is the ultimate chronic illness survival guide. So don't let the title throw you off. If you don't have long COVID, but you do have another chronic condition, definitely get yourself a hard copy of this book. I like the fact that it has a disclaimer. I have tons of notes here, by the way, so I'm just going to try to summarize as much as possible. I took notes because I listened to the audiobook and I'm not very good at retaining the information. So hopefully this video doesn't go on very long. Just know that I highly recommend that you get this book if you're chronically ill, especially if you are new to chronic illness. It does give a disclaimer. It's not offering any cures. They're not going to tell you about, they do talk about some therapies that have been found to be helpful with long COVID. But they're not going to give you a protocol to cure or to, help your symptoms. This is a survival guide. This is a roadmap to navigating your chronic illness and the healthcare system. And it's kind of specific to Americans because of our healthcare system here, but I still think it would be helpful for everyone, just general, a general guidebook for anybody with a chronic condition in any country. But just know that it is written by an American, and it is kind of specific, can be a bit specific to the American healthcare system. It does address a lot of the psychosocial types of issues, society stuff, like our need to be useful, our need to, our the expectation that we have to work in order to be useful, and how difficult that becomes for somebody with a chronic condition. So just know that there is some of that in the book. Um, but here's a reason why this book, you need to have this book, especially if you're new to chronic illness. It guides you through our healthcare system. It gives you language to use with your physician or with your doctors, which can be very helpful in being taken more seriously. I really wish I had had this book years ago, because I've had to sort of figure out all of this stuff on my own. And she gives you language. She gives you sort of a template to use when you're speaking to your doctors. Um, Language that doctors can understand, or that doctors use, so that you can be taken more seriously. And I think that that was very, very essential. It's language that you wouldn't otherwise learn unless somebody told you, like, hey, use this type of wording when you are asking doctors questions about your condition. It has really great stories from people. So she actually takes excerpts of other people's writings, people that are suffering with long COVID. So you get these very real world stories. And let me tell you, they hit home. I mean, they really hit home. It's like, if you've been chronically ill for a while, it's like reading your own story, just all of the struggles that these people go through. It does provide content warnings when there is sensitive material, at least in the audiobook. I imagine in the actual paper copy, it does provide a content warning as well. So I like that, because if you've seen some of my other reviews of other books that talk about trauma and chronic illness and stuff like that, they can be very graphic. The descriptions can be very graphic, and there's literally no warning. And there are some things that I just don't like to read, or at least I like to be warned about in advance. It does talk about how long COVID is going to present a really big health crisis, which I have been saying. I've been saying that on this channel. We're headed towards a serious health crisis. If you thought that, during COVID, our healthcare system was under a lot of strain, it's gonna continue. It's gonna be an ongoing issue. So it's gonna go from an acute strain on the healthcare system to a chronic, ongoing. It's almost like a chronic illness for the healthcare system. And they do talk about that here, and how that's going to cost us as a society. Provides tips on self-care and prioritizing yourself. This book, it does go section by section, and I did notice that each section, addresses something different. There is a section that discusses all of the different conditions that can arise as a result of having, long COVID or any other kind of long post-viral, post-infectious condition. So they talk about POTS, and they describe what POTS is. They talk about MECFS. They talk about, what that is, and where they believe the origins are from. They talk about all of these other sort of symptoms of an ongoing chronic illness. I can't go through the whole list. Like I said, this book, it's not very big from kind of what I saw. It's not a big book, but it's packed with information. I mean, to go through a full description of like POTS, MECFS, and all of that, I mean, they really did a good job in making it condensed. So I really appreciate that. They do talk about some therapies, for example, like hyperbaric oxygen, that has been shown to be helpful with long COVID. They do address Lyme disease, multiple sclerosis, MECFS, as other conditions that may arise as a post-viral, post-infectious type of situation. So I like the fact that she does include those, because as we know, all of those conditions are very controversial. Doctors and scientists avoid talking about them or including them or lumping them in with long COVID, which it's kind of the same thing. I believe it's gonna, in the future we're gonna find out that it's the same phenomenon behind long COVID that is happening with these other conditions. So I like the fact that they address that. Um, it talks about how to navigate the disability system, getting, qualified for disability benefits. I really like that. Um, and how to talk to your doctor about that, and how to, kind of, get everybody to work for you in order to get that, the disability benefits that you need. And it does talk about how difficult that is as well. So, all of this stuff was stuff that I wish I would have known. I wish I would have had. This is going to make your life a lot easier as you're going through this process. I had to struggle and stumble through it. A lot of us have had to. But now, because of this book, you won't have to. The one part of the book that may not apply to all of us is that, she talks about getting involved with research studies, because you may have access to like up and coming treatments, or better access to doctors that are researching long COVID or that believe in long COVID. Obviously, if you have like ME/CFS or Lyme disease, those types of conditions, there aren't any really like ongoing research for that. I mean, there might be some for ME/CFS. For Lyme disease, I know that like no one's researching it. It's very difficult to find any studies. People have just kind of pushed that one, to, as far away from, the forefront as possible. So for those of you with long COVID, this would be really great, because, you can find, there's going to be a lot of studies, I imagine, in the coming years. So she talks about getting involved in studies, because it'll give you access to medical care that you probably wouldn't have access to otherwise, which is, a very, very smart thing to do. So that's probably like the only part that wouldn't apply to those of us who have had ongoing chronic illness pre-pandemic. So, I also, Akiko Iwasaki is the name of the Yale researcher. She's a doctor, and she's the one that is at the forefront of long COVID, not just long COVID, but post-infectious types of illness, but she's focusing on long COVID. And she does I think it's called a prologue, or the piece at the end of the book. And I like the fact that there was a doctor, an actual doctor / researcher / professor, involved in this book. You don't want a book that is just, patient testimonials and stuff like that. You want a doctor, and she actually is kind of like backing this book, which I really like. And, again, like I said, and this is one of the, I do, my politics or my beliefs tend to be, left of center. This book definitely has a very far left kind of bent, or at least a lot of people are going to see it as that. And that's kind of my, one of my concerns. There's very much an overuse of the word gaslight in this book. And you guys know how I feel about that word. I did a whole video on that. And of course, they talk about people of color. They, address pronoun usage and things like that. And so my concern is that this book is going to be a bit of a turnoff for people that are a little bit more right of center or farther to the right. And one of the things that I know that we know is going to, how can I say this? Long COVID is not going to care about your political affiliation. It is not going to care whether you are left or right or center or nothing. A lot of people on the right are going to be turned off by this book because they're going to see all of these buzzwords used, and even though this book could help them with their ongoing health issues, they might close it and say, I don't want to hear any of this. This is nonsense. One thing that I do like, so that the language that is used, like I said, could be considered kind of left leaning language, or it has a left leaning kind of vibe. But they do address in this book not just long COVID, but also vaccine side effects. And I like the fact that they do talk about that, because that may, and I'm not, you guys know that I'm unvaccinated, but I'm not an anti-vaxxer. Everybody in my family got vaccinated. I highly pushed everybody to get vaccinated because that was also going to keep me safe. But I do like that they address that, because it is kind of a fact. I do know people in my family that have had ongoing side effects from the vaccine, nothing severe, but they have had ongoing side effects. Granted, they also had pre-existing conditions prior to getting vaccinated. And I do think that it is important to acknowledge that and address that issue as well. That may draw in maybe some of that far right crowd, but it does say, it does make it clear that it wants to dispel misinformation while also acknowledging the fact that there are some people that will have side effects from the vaccine. And like I said, the language in the book can be a bit of a turnoff for people on the right, but I highly, like I said, even if let's try not to look at this as a political thing. This is a guidebook for everybody, and it is essential for people with chronic conditions, not just long COVID, not just people on the political left, everybody, to have this book. It's going to be your guidebook. It has the whole template on how to handle this and how to navigate the medical system. Not only that, it was also how to read research. There was a whole chapter on how to read research, which I was like, wow, that's something that I have yet to learn. And there is a lot of research out there, and there's going to be a lot of research on long COVID coming up in the following years. And she actually tells you how to read the research and how to understand the language of that. That's something that I have not seen anywhere else. And that's something that's going to be incredibly useful. And they also tell you how to sort of distinguish research that's legit or that may apply more to you in your situation, and research that may not be, complete, or that is just kind of preliminary research, not very concrete. They tell you how to distinguish that. And that to me was, obviously I was listening to the audiobook. I need to get myself a paper copy of this thing, because I have to look at it, and bookmark those parts and refer back. This is a book that you will be referring back to. That is why you need to have a paper copy of this book. You're going to have to put your sticky notes in it and refer back to it. Take it with you to doctor's appointments. Have it on you when you're navigating the healthcare system and any type of research that you're reading. I have tons of notes. I have a lot here. I know I'm gonna finish this video and I'm gonna be like, oh, I left that out. Oh, I left this out, which is why I can only tell you to get the book. Get yourself a hard copy of this book. Whatever kind of chronic condition you have, get it. It's the information in it is invaluable. It's a guidebook. It's a template that you need if you are chronically ill from any type of chronic illness. Even if you've been chronically ill for many, many years and you've already accomplished some of these things, like getting your disability benefits and, having a treatment, you're already, you have a treatment that is helping you. I would still recommend getting the book, because it may help open doors to something else. And like I said, it also helps you learn how to talk to doctors in a language that they can understand. So I'm not going to keep going with this. Get this book. I'm going to do another video as well, talking about my chronic illness must-haves, must-have books, because this is a new one. This is the latest one to add to the collection. So I will come back with another video addressing the article that this book was written in response to, and I don't recommend reading that article, but I recommend getting this book. Get it, have it on you at all times. So can't recommend it enough. And once again, this is what it looks like. It's a bright yellow book, the Long COVID Survival Guide. You might look at it and go, oh, that's not the book, because it just looks so cheerful and bright, but that's the book. It's bright yellow. It's, it looks like a children's book, but anyways, get the book. 2 thumbs up for that one, and I'll see you in my next video.